Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Founders Talk at Temi. Now, Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. And each week, we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. Today, we're lucky enough to have an amazing guest joining us with a spectacular backdrop, making mine look a little bit lackluster. But Michael Cioni is here to join us. He is the CEO and co-founder at Strada.
Thanks
Welcome,
for having
Michael.
me. Glad to be here.
It's lovely to have you. And I feel like today's going to be a really interesting podcast. We've got lots of interesting things to talk about. But just as a little bit of a background, because I know like you have a mega successful career, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the company first?
Sure thing. Well, I live in Los Angeles. I've lived here for the last 25 years. I've been a serial entrepreneur, but working mainly in the movie business. And so I've worked on films like Pirates of the Caribbean and the original Avatar and Spider-Man and The Social Network and lots of feature films that were particularly interesting because they were part of the journey in Hollywood when we switched from film to digital. And while we went through that experience as consumers as well in the retail space, Hollywood had to do it. And in a world that is as big and the gambles are as big as they are in Hollywood, that transition was really complicated and cumbersome. And so my expertise came in as someone who grew up with digital. I was the person that started to insert myself as a digital expert and helped these filmmakers who were masters of their craft switch from film to digital. And that became the propellant for my career.
So for founders listening, like what kind of mindset that you have from filmmaking like translates quite well into like building startups and entrepreneurialism?
Simple, high pain tolerance and a desire to solve problems, right? And often the problems that are the best ones to solve are not difficult to understand, but they're hard to see. Think about that difference. Like it's not difficult to understand, but it's hard to see. A lot of times people are working so hard to try to find a problem we're solving that they're realizing that they're looking for problems that aren't really that big of a problem. Most of the time, if you've got the right idea to solve a problem, the response people say is, "Why didn't anyone think of that before?" Right? Have you ever heard that? That's like one of these key ingredients that you should really lean in to that problem you're solving. When someone says, "Oh, well, no one thought of that before," and that became sort of the foundation for me to lean into these high pain tolerance situations where you're trying to tell people, yeah, shooting on film probably not going to be the best choice for everyone going forward. What if we could do this digitally? How would we change things? What would that look like? And then that sort of opens the door to the next problem and the next problem to solve. And then you get this cascading effect of becoming a problem solver by way of actually living the pain with your customers and your colleagues and collaborators, and then getting inspired to try to solve the next problem. So it's a never-ending journey, and a high pain tolerance and the ability to identify problems is the key ingredient.
Would you say like independent creators are like better positioned than traditional studios in terms of innovation?
Unequivocally, unequivocally, for a couple of reasons. One, independent creators have very little bias. They don't have a bias, and they really don't have legacy. Two, they don't have a lot of bosses. One thing that's really interesting about Hollywood is the buyers of tools and technologies are not often the users. Right? A lot of companies sell to the studio, but the studio isn't necessarily a user of the tool or tech. The creative people they end up hiring. So it's really interesting what's cool about creative content creators is that they are the buyer and the user at the same time. That produces an amazing feedback loop that a lot of industries don't get to take advantage of. And that becomes a really unique advantage for the creator because now they're more careful about what they buy. Think about it. If you're a creator and you're like, I don't know if I want that subscription, or I don't know if I want that camera, or I don't know if I want that editing tool, that's going to be because you're the user. You're speaking on behalf of the consumer and user. That's not always the case in enterprise spaces. So that makes it a ripe opportunity for content creators to be smarter consumers, and but they also don't have the bureaucracy that prevents them from taking calculated risks. Where a lot of studios that I work with simply say, we refuse to be first to do something, and we are not going to try this until 3 or 4 other people already give a testimony that it's successful. A content creator doesn't think that way. They're like, hey, something new came out, let's try it. And that's really the right attitude going forward.
So if I'm an entrepreneurial person and I want to get into like filmmaking, what kinds of questions should I be asking myself in terms of like AI, like production tasks, and what things should remain human and allow like creative decisions to be made by a human?
Well, I think, the idea of integrating AI into your workflow, for me, it's a tool that's used to help move the process forward, not to actually generate the content. AI being used to actually create the content is going to almost always come out very synthetic or disposable. I'm not saying that that's bad or wrong. I'm just saying there are very few AI generated materials that someone would want to pay to see. Right? You could argue that, but I think it's pretty true. If you're going to get in line, or you're going to want something, you're going to pay something, or you're going to want to come back and see a new episode next week, that's probably going to have to be authentic in order for it to suspend the disbelief or create the societal hype that makes people want to do that. This is sort of an oversimplification, but if someone could make an AI show that won Emmys and got tens of millions of people to watch, they would, but they can't. And why is that? Because AI shows really have never been built. There is technically today, there's no way to generate 120 minutes of AI consistently for a single story. That doesn't exist technologically, which is why you haven't seen it done. Will that come about in the future? Maybe, maybe not. It's actually hard to say. Some people say it has to be. Why won't AI ever generate a 2-hour movie? Well, because today it's kind of financially impossible to generate enough consistency for 120 minutes that it makes sense financially or creatively. Like, the consistency is bad in AI, which would really break a story if people's faces changed and the car they're driving changes models and the time of day keeps shifting. Like, those types of things would take you out of the show and you'd be like, this doesn't make sense. I don't like it. Or it would just simply be a financial quagmire, that the ability to render these experimental results clip by clip over and over and over is such a financial quagmire that in some analysis, it would just be cheaper to go out and shoot it than it is to render it wrong 50 times per shot before you get one that you can kind of use. These are the types of exciting things to experiment with, but that's why AI for me is more valuable when it's rooted in our ability to use it as a tool to help us make the movie for like scheduling and budgeting and analyzing and things like that versus actually generating the material.
So of those tasks that you've mentioned, like which one would you say is like the biggest pitfall? Which one is the most time consuming for someone who's looking to start up their own film company?
It's funny. Everybody has seen that visual picture of the iceberg for the Titanic, right? And you see this little piece of ice on the surface, and then there's this mountain beneath it, right? The problem with a lot of outsiders' perspective of filmmaking is we see the exciting stuff, like the cameras and the actors and the explosions and all the beautiful shots. That's the part you see above the surface. But really what makes a movie is the mountain hiding beneath the surface, and that is the laborious, almost boring, difficult, challenging paperwork story. There's actually an author who has a really good analysis of this, and it kind of leans into the mundane. But essentially, the theory is that nothing is built without people sitting at desks doing paperwork. Nothing. Nothing, like nothing. Nothing you can see that looks exciting or interesting or even seems satisfying from a professional perspective. None of that can exist without people at desks and paperwork. And the analysis is really ironic because it talks about, think of a movie like Office Space. If you've seen Office Space, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you're nuts. Go watch it. You will love it. It's 30 years old, but this movie sort of suggests that working in a cubicle punching a keyboard and making spreadsheets is the worst life you could ever have. When in reality, it's a great life, because a century ago, people would do anything to be able to sit in an air-conditioned room and get paid 52 weeks out of the year punching a keyboard. That sounds like heaven to people a century or 10 centuries ago, right? And we have gotten to this point where we're like, oh, I don't want to do that. But then if you look at the result, something tactile, whether it's a car or it's a plane or it's somebody shooting a movie or it's whatever it is, there is only a building that was built, a hotel you're staying in, like whatever it is, it was generated by people sitting at desks punching keyboards. The monotony is what makes it work. The filmmaking process is created in that. It's the stuff hidden below the surface that's all about the paperwork. AI is one of the greatest resources to help us speed up that mundane, so we can either A, do more movies in the same amount of time, B, make a movie that's disorganized less disorganized, because on some level they're all a mess, and 3, you might be able to simply get more sleep than you would if you didn't have it, and you're getting the same amount of work done, but you're doing it in less time. So your stress level goes down. These are the best ways to integrate AI into storytelling, and it's the best ways for creative people who want to be storytellers in a large space, understand how to scale themselves. Think of AI as an agent, an assistant that can help you scale you, and it's best applied in the parts that are not that exciting. Nobody wants to do the boring paperwork of payroll and location scouting and contracts and lawyer negotiations, right? Nobody wants to do that, but none of the movie gets seen if you don't do that stuff. So the exciting parts are pointless if nobody gets to see it, which is why you've got to make sure that you get experienced people inside of that logistical producing, post-production supervising those components of the workflow.
So you've made like over 150 films. If you could go back to yourself when you first started and give yourself one piece of advice, having been through those 150 films, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Well, that's a great question. I've been fortunate to work on over 150 movies with some of the greatest creative minds of our time. And I played a small role in a big team of people that helped make all these movies happen. The advice I would have is to constantly challenge the status quo. Every time I challenge the status quo, and I have a reputation for being someone who does that, I look back on myself and I realized I should have pushed further. I should have pushed more. When I have a hunch on something that's going to materialize, when things start to materialize, they start as fads, right? Anything's a fad. Fashion, music, whatever it is. But when a technology comes out, it's often a fad. That fad, if it's really good, can convert into a trend, and it becomes trendy. More people pick up on it. You see and hear about it more. Once that trend goes through full conversion, it becomes a standard, right? And that process of converting fad to trend to standard doesn't happen with everything. But what I have found is I have a knack for being able to identify standards when they're in the trendy or fad categories. That's when you become an early adopter. When you do that, you need to lean into it more. My advice to myself would be I should have leaned further into those identified trends and fads, because they all tipped into standards. And had I pushed harder on those instead of being conservative, I would have been even further along when the standard converted. And that's the market advantage for entrepreneurs, is sort of that early adoption strategy. When you are a market mover and you're able to infiltrate parts of the market before they become a standard, you have more education, you have more experience, you have more contacts, and you have more confidence, so that when it inevitably tips into a standard, you become the de facto person people resource to get answers. They'll pay you for that. And so that is an opportunity to become an expert in these emerging spaces. If you wait and you're a conservative, or you move onto the late adoption side of the scale, when those things happen, those standards materialize, you're not the ideal person for people to hire or employ based on your lack of knowledge of a certain subject matter. And so this is a transferable technique that can work in your favor cycle after cycle, tech after tech, trend after trend, fad after fad. And when you start to build that momentum, you gain a reputation for being. I was on a call just 2 hours ago and someone says, I have a question for you about this product. You know everything. Can you answer it? I didn't know the answer, but he thought I would know because he thinks I know everything. I certainly do not know everything, but in this circle that I'm in, that person thought I knew more than he did about this subject. That can be useful in business, and that's partially by being a student of leaning into these fads and trends long before they become standards.
So you mentioned contacts there. Now, having never worked in Hollywood myself, I think networking is probably very important. Is that as important as you think? Like, do you really need to get yourself out there when you're going ahead with making these things?
Absolutely. You know, there used to be a phrase that a lot of people said all the time. It's all about who you know, right? And that transcends any business. If you're in the medical field, if you make farm equipment, if you grow vegetables or crops and you sell, it's who you know, right? That is a phrase that we've all heard before. But I think that phrase needs to be modified now with social media and with the access to any social media channel. It's no longer who you know, it's more who knows you. And so it's important that people learn to put themselves in a place that they can automatically intersect with the community out there. So the answer to your question is yes, the networking is still absolutely paramount to having success, but you have an advantage now in that if people know you, you don't physically have to be in Hollywood to do that anymore, right? We had to physically be here in order for you to know people. Now, because they can find you through other resources, then they can know you and want to collaborate. Ultimately, what the networking does is it simply allows you to fail up. By that, I mean you're able to meet collaborators, try things, experiment, and when you make a mistake, you fail up. And you can fail up faster because you can find more and more talented people to improve your work. There's an old sort of a joke that I think makes a lot of sense. And when I grew up in the 90s, playing grunge music. Everybody was in a band. I played a bunch of instruments and we were always in a band. But and I was in Chicago, the city of Chicago. So there was always a lot of like rock music coming out of Chicago. And the joke that we used to always know is that you never wanted to be the best member of your band. Because if you're the best member of your band, that band's not going anywhere. If you think you're any good, you want to be the worst member of your band because that band might go somewhere. You want to be with a team that's going to take you somewhere, especially if you think you're good. The same thing happens in business or in media and entertainment. I'm always looking to attach myself to people better than me. That networking is how you can accomplish that. And the more you can find people better than you, your band gets better and you fail up. And then you have a chance of actually working on bigger projects and making better projects of your own and becoming an expert in a specific field. But if you do this solopreneur approach, you're only measuring you by you. That's a really, I wouldn't say it's a selfish way of working, but it's a self-centered way of working. And I think you're inhibiting your own personal growth by not having the risk of attaching yourselves to people better than you, which will build your confidence and it will make you better if you let each other do that. And so that's always why I've tried to, find people that are better than me so I can learn from them and apply that to the next project.
While you were talking, I just thought of a film, The Blair Witch Project. I don't know if you know it. I'm quite old, so that's one of my time. Let's say I'm a young filmmaker, and maybe I don't have a lot of money. I've got a limited budget. Where would you tell me to invest my time? Is it in things that I can save money with? Is it things that I can save time with? What should I be doing? Is it I need the best camera on the market? I need the best equipment? I need the best AI? What is it that I need? Is it just the idea itself?
It's an awesome question. I hope this answer is useful to somebody out there listening. If you learned how to ride a bike, everybody goes through that process where a family member or friend teaches them how to ride a bike. Once you start to figure out how to ride that bike, you do not sign up for What's the big long French bike race we just saw happen? What's that called?
Oh my God.
What's the
We'll continue with it, and if I suddenly remember, I'll
all
mention
right,
it.
yeah, we just saw the Tour de France. Is it just Tour
Yeah,
de France?
that's
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah.
So, like, you would not sign up for the Tour de France the next day. And it's like, well, why? I now know how to ride a bicycle. Well, just because you learned how to ride a bike does not automatically qualify you for the most difficult bike race on the planet. That's actually a bad decision. Even though riding a bike is all what the Tour de France is, it's just riding a bike, but you're doing it at the most extreme level. This is one of the creative quagmires and mistakes that people get into. They get overly ambitious. They learn or have this desire to tell a story, and they go right to making a feature film, and the Blair Witch Project becomes sort of a red herring. The Blair Witch Project is not a rule, it's an extreme exception. And so it is not a good metric by which to measure yourself or target. It is good in that there were these ambitious people who came up with a clever way to market a film using the internet, which nobody really had ever done until that point. What made the Blair Witch Project great was it was a great film, but it was marketed perfectly in a market that had never been tapped in that way. That's what's unique about it. What's really cool about this is what we're suggesting is that you need to find a way to get yourself somewhere between learning a bike and the Tour de France. Now, that's the technique. How I would do that is to start making short films. I actually went to a really crummy film school in Southern Illinois University. And this isn't a knock against them directly, but they weren't known as a great film school. But what was great about their film school was the work that we did was serialized, meaning we made dozens and dozens of short films, dozens and dozens. I think I might have made 70, 80, 90 short films in school. By the time I was a dropout, by the time I got pretty far along in school before I left, I had shot millions of frames, edited millions of clips, and tried millions of things and got over all those mistakes. What the pristine, high caliber, well-known film schools do, which I emphatically disagree with, and I think it's a disservice to their students, is they put all the pressure on these young people to make something big and put it all in one big move and try to raise $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to make this grandiose film. I challenge anybody. If you spend your entire collegiate career and you put in all your blood, sweat, and tears to make one or two films, you will never be as skilled as if you made 200 crappy films that were like 1 or 2 pages that no one ever sees. See, you're putting undue pressure because it's the person learning how to ride a bike and they're going right to the Tour de France. Guess what? You're going to lose. You're going to be there injured on the ground and stuck and try to figure out, how do I get back home? That's what happens with so many filmmakers who try to enter competitions and races and scales of markets that they're not ready for. The best thing you can do is take out an iPhone, which you all have, take out a computer, which you all have, and start shooting something simple and small and easy. And then your own ambition will grow it. And you will figure out what you're good at and what you're not good at. And then that networking we talked about a moment ago will allow you to fill the parts you're not good at with someone else. I need a better editor. I need a better actor. I need a better cinematographer. I need someone who knows something about cameras or lights or whatever it is. And you start to build your team that way. The Beatles all played a different instrument. They didn't all play the same instrument. They all brought their own unique characteristics to the band, and as a whole, they made the best songs. That's what you got to think about, assembling that band together and starting working nightclubs. Nobody knows, nobody thinks about how many crappy strip club joints the Beatles sang in, but that's how it happened. You can read the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Just read the first 60 pages. It could change how you think about everything. If you just read 60 pages of that book, it will really help you understand that it goes back to the iceberg. It's the under the surface stuff that really makes great people great. It's never the top of surface visible stuff.
So you mentioned errors and mistakes there. I just want to jump on that idea. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here, Michael, and assume that you're not perfect and that you have made some mistakes in your career. How do you know when to walk away from something? I imagine people just no, it's got to work, and they keep piling on with it. When is it time to pivot and when is it time to persevere?
Yeah, great question. The term for that situation is called sunk cost fallacy. And when you are so invested in something that's not working, your brain tells you because you've invested so much time or money or love into something, you must keep investing in it. But it's the sunk cost fallacy. It's a lie. You end up lying to yourself that if you just keep with it, it will slowly improve over time, when that almost inevitably is never the case. So you have to have enough honesty with yourself to look at data with sober eyes and recognize when your sunk costs are actually a exit sign and you need to just take the next off ramp and get off this thing and try again. So that is best achieved by talking with people you trust. And sometimes the people you work with are the wrong people because they can also be victims of the sunk cost fallacy, especially if they're investors or partners in the product or project that is struggling. Instead, you need confidants that are outside of your business side or your creative side so that they can help weigh in. And you got to make yourself vulnerable that they feel comfortable enough telling you you're wrong. Because one of the mistakes I made growing up as a young entrepreneur, I was so overtly confident and I projected so much external confidence that my closest friends weren't comfortable telling me when they thought I was wrong. And I would make mistakes in my life. And then when I talked to them about regrets later, they'd like, yeah, that's what I was thinking would happen, or that's how I thought it was going down. I'm like, why did you say something? And they said, well, you seemed to be so sure that this was the right decision. I didn't want to like rain on your parade. That's my mistake. That's an ego getting in the way of self-help. And you got to make it so that you can receive feedback, especially negative feedback. See, one of the problems with people who don't like negative feedback is, and especially, I don't want to criticize young people, but there has been a change in the weather that's totally dysfunctional, where people confuse the difference between a criticism and an attack. They are not the same things. And the problem is when you conflate an attack and a criticism, you refuse to take the advice because a criticism can be just that. It's not personal. It's not mean-spirited. It's not wrong. It's necessary. It's justified. But if you project that that's an attack, you can't talk to me that way, or that makes me feel uncomfortable, I don't like how that sounds, then all of a sudden no one's going to give you any feedback and you don't receive any criticism. So you have no metric by which to improve. So this is a totally dysfunctional component in the way people think and work, and especially in large businesses and corporations where criticisms are almost considered bad, which is wrong, because you need to have an environment where criticisms are welcome and there's a constructive way to deliver it.
I love that advice and I completely agree with you. I think it's because I'm older that I've seen that transition. So maybe we've seen the same kind of change in people. We've got one more question, Mike. I'm so sorry, the time is running out, but let's imagine I finished it. I finished my film. Everything's the way I like it to be. How do I go out there and get myself noticed? Do I go on YouTube? Do I send the film to Hollywood producers? Do I try to get it shown at a cinema? Do I advertise? What should I do?
Well, I would actually say take the concept you just shared and flip it upside down. This is the new normal. Instead of saying, I've made a film, now how do I get it out there? Do I use YouTube? Do it the other way around. Start with YouTube. Remember I said, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. Start becoming someone known on some level. That's independent and different for everybody. But start becoming interesting first, then make the film, because that way you have a built-in audience. You already have people that will give you feedback and watch it and consume and talk about it and share it and say, can you make another one? So one of the best opportunities for influencers is to identify what makes you unique and interesting to watch and then parlay that into long-form storytelling. So I would argue do it the other way. Now, the way you described is the more traditional route, and my advice as a Hollywood expert, so to speak, is not to follow our lead. This is the wrong model for people not living and working in the studio system, the traditional union studio system. If you're not in Hollywood or a Hollywood-based infrastructure like London's version of Hollywood and New York's version of Hollywood, or even Berlin, then it is better to leverage your own components that make you interesting in your own social channels. Listen to what the users are engaging in, figure out what makes you interesting. And YouTube has this really cool metric. If you don't get 1,000 subscribers in, I think it's like 15 months or 18 months, if you start a channel and you don't get 1,000 subscribers in about a year and a half, then you'll never get 1,000 subscribers. It'll never grow. It means what you're doing isn't working and it never will. Sunk cost fallacy. Don't keep dumping into it. But if you do something that gets engagement, do more of that, more of that, more of that, and that engagement will grow. And you'll start to see your subscription and your followers grow faster than the months that go by. That's telling you whatever you're doing is resonating with people, and then it becomes a cascading opportunity of how do you just reach more and more and more. Once you hit that and you get that itch to tell a long-form story, you're already going to be equipped to do that. Why? Because you already made 100 crappy stories that nobody saw, and that's how you got your discipline and your team, and you got your plans and your gear, and then you can apply all that into making something great that already has an audience built in to view it.
I don't know about you, but I thought that was a great question to finish on. And thank you very much for sharing that pearl of wisdom with us, Michael. Listen, I just want to thank you so much again for taking time to speak with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That was Michael Cioni, CEO and co-founder at Strada.